The sun hadn't touched the village in 93 days. The ground cracked like old skin, the rivers had receded to nothing more than bitter threads, and the air tasted of dust. Even the birds had stopped singing, as if sound itself had given up. Crops withered before they flowered. Goats gave no milk. Children woke coughing in the night, their throats parched and blistered. The people of Dor believed the gods were angry. And angry gods demanded something in return. That return was Selah. She stood in the square with cracked heels and clenched fists, a linen shawl around her shoulders and dust in her lashes. She was only 16, the daughter of a potter and a woman whose body had been claimed by fever a year earlier. Until now, Selah had been just a girl who filled jars and cleaned bowls and walked to the dry well every morning before dawn. But now she was the chosen one, the offering. The elders called it an honor. They said her name had emerged in the smoke when the sacred herbs were burned. They said her face had been seen in flame. They said the fire god had asked for her. Selah had not asked for the fire god. She had not asked for the robe they draped over her shoulders, too heavy with embroidered flames. She had not asked for the red dye painted in spirals down her arms or the tight gold ring looped through her nose. And she had certainly not asked for the silence of her neighbors, the way they averted their eyes when she passed, the way the woman who once kissed her forehead now stepped aside with a bowed head and covered mouth. Only one person had cried for her, her younger brother, Ivan. He had hidden behind the water trough that morning and begged her not to go, his small hands gripping her leg like he could anchor her to the earth. "They can't take you," he had sobbed. "You didn't do anything wrong." Selah had crouched beside him and pressed their foreheads together. "It's not about wrong or right, Ivan. It's about fear." "But I'm scared too," he had whispered. She hadn't had an answer for that. Now, hours later, the villagers gathered in a wide circle at the base of the hill where the pyre had been built, a tangled structure of bone-dry wood soaked in oil pressed from the last of the sunflower seeds. The pyre stood taller than the chief's hut. At the top was a shallow platform, a bed of fire, a cradle of smoke. Selah's hands were tied in front of her, not out of cruelty, they said, but to ensure her spirit remained calm when the fire claimed her. She was guided by two masked attendants, men who had once been farmers and husbands but now moved like shadows. They said no words as they led her up the narrow ramp to the top. Each step was slower than the last. At the base, the priest raised his arms. "Dor has dried. Dor has cried. Dor must be fed." The crowd murmured the words back. The sun beat down like punishment. Selah stood at the summit, her toes touching the edge of the wood. Below her, the fire had not yet been lit. That would come once she was lying down, still. The oil fumes were strong. Her eyes stung. She turned her head once, not to the priest, not to the elders who chanted, but to the crowd. Searching. There he was, Ivan. Barefoot and shaking behind the edge of a hut, his face pale with dust, his hands curled into fists too small to save anyone. He met her gaze and didn't blink. She mouthed 3 words, "I love you." He mouthed 4, "I'll come for you." Then the torch was handed to the priest. The flames kissed the base of the pyre, licking upward. Crackling began immediately, wood catching like dry skin in heat. Selah was pressed gently to the platform, her robes spreading beneath her like a blood-stained river. The attendant stepped back. Heat rose. The crackling deepened. Smoke danced around her face, and her heart beat so fast she thought it might catch fire before her skin did. She closed her eyes. She waited. The fire climbed. It reached the edge of her robe. The hem curled. Threads turned black. But she didn't feel it. Not the burn. Not the sting. Instead, something cold swept over her, not like water but like absence. A sudden vacuum of all things familiar. The sounds of the crowd dulled. The priest's chant faded. Her lungs still filled with smoke but not as suffocation, as breath. When she opened her eyes, she was not lying down. She was standing. And she was not atop the pyre. She was deep inside it. Surrounded by flame. No, not just flame. Color. Movement. The fire did not bite her skin. It kissed her forehead. It coiled around her ankles. It slipped over her wrists like bracelets of light. She took a step forward, and the floor beneath her feet glowed but didn't burn. The space was vast and shifting, walls made of fire that moved like cloth, a sky of smoke that swirled like a living thing. She should have screamed. She didn't. She walked forward. Each step made the flames part. Whispers moved with them, words too soft to understand, but laced with something that made her chest ache. Not sorrow. Recognition. As if the fire knew her. As if it had always known her. At the center of this strange cavern, a great figure waited. It was neither man nor beast, neither solid nor smoke. It flickered with light, shoulders like mountains, a face that shimmered with molten gold. Its eyes were embers that did not blink. It looked at her. She looked back. "You are not fuel," it said. The voice filled her bones. "You are flint." She dropped to her knees. The fire surrounded her, not like a prison but a breath. It pressed into her chest, her heart, her blood. Not to steal her life, but to awaken something that had been sleeping. Outside, the crowd stood in perfect silence. There were no screams. Only a long, strange quiet. Then, a single gust of wind swept through the square, sudden and sharp. The pyre cracked but did not fall. The fire died instantly, leaving nothing but blackened wood and curls of smoke. The priest stepped forward. He looked into the ashes. Nothing remained. No body. No cloth. "Blessed," he whispered. "The god has taken her completely." The villagers bowed. But one boy, hidden behind a hut, did not bow. He stared with eyes full of fire and waited. Because he had seen her mouth move. And she had not said goodbye. Ask ChatGPT. She woke with no breath left in her lungs, yet she was breathing. No air, no wind, just heat, endless and humming, surrounding her like a living thing. The moment Selah opened her eyes, everything she knew about fire unraveled. She had expected agony. She had expected smoke to claw down her throat, flames to peel the skin from her bones, her limbs to stiffen and seize in the cruel grip of heat. Instead, the fire moved like silk. It didn't eat her. It wrapped around her like robes of shifting light, curling at her elbows, licking gently at her cheeks, fluttering across her ankles with the delicacy of water. The colors weren't just red and orange either. They bled into golds and blues, soft violets and flashes of green, constantly moving, as if she were walking inside a stained glass window that had forgotten it was ever solid. She sat up. The ground beneath her hands should have been scorched, but it felt like smooth stone, warm, yes, but not scalding. Her skin glowed faintly where the flame brushed it. She looked at her arms, her palms, the inside of her wrists. The spirals the priest had painted in dye were still there, but something shimmered beneath them now. Veins of light pulsed faintly, as if fire had taken residence just beneath the surface. "Where am I?" she asked aloud. Her voice was soft but carried, echoed gently in all directions. No answer came. But the fire shifted. She stood slowly, eyes scanning her surroundings. This was not the pyre she'd been thrown into. This was deeper. She was in some kind of chamber, impossibly wide, ringed with shifting columns of flame. Above her, the sky was black smoke, but it moved like cloud and cloth, folding in on itself, revealing bursts of stars before swallowing them again. And beyond her, at the far edge of this vast cavern, there was a soft glow, not fire but something colder. Pale. Almost silver. Something waited there. She walked. The flames parted for her. Each step she took seemed to ripple through the ground, not tremors but pulses like a heartbeat under her feet. Her breath came easier the farther she walked, and with it came something else, voices. Not clear at first, more like embers crackling, soft and broken. A word here. A sigh. A hum. Then a name. Selah. She paused. The fire paused with her. She turned, but no one was behind her. Just the path she had come from, now swallowed by a curtain of glowing ash. She swallowed hard and stepped forward again. Selah. This time the voice was firmer. Closer. It wasn't frightening. In fact, it sounded like it had been waiting. Patiently. For years. She approached the silver light ahead, and as she did, the cavern around her narrowed. The fire receded, drawing up and around into smooth walls of glassy stone, glowing faintly from within. As if the fire had carved this place over time, folding in on itself to create a hall. At the center of the chamber, the floor fell away. A pit, not black but clear. She could see deep down into it, deeper than any well, and far below, she saw the reflection of flames and faces. So many faces. She gasped. They were girls. Dozens. Hundreds. Their faces flickered in and out, not screaming, not reaching, only watching. Not all were whole. Some had ash smudged where their mouths should be. Others had eyes filled with smoke or hair braided with sparks. They shimmered like dreams caught in the coals of a dying fire. She stepped back instinctively. But the pit did not reach for her. It only showed her. "You are not the first," came the voice again. She turned. A shape stood behind her. Not flame, not smoke, but a blend of both. Tall, genderless, its body made of slow-burning embers stitched with strands of light. Its eyes were two dim coals, steady and without anger. She didn't speak. It did. You are not fuel, it said, voice crackling like a hearth. You are flint. She swallowed. What is this place? The hollow ember, it said. The place the fire brings what it is not ready to destroy. Then why am I here? Because you were not given. You were taken. And fire does not take what it does not want. Selah stepped closer to the edge of the pit again. The girls, the ones she saw, they were watching still. Are they, the others? The figure didn't answer directly. Instead, it moved its hand and the walls of flame shifted again. Selah turned and watched as visions shimmered in the fire, faint and flickering. Girls being bound just as she had been. Names whispered. Faces blurred. The pyre lit. And silence after silence after silence. They never screamed either, Selah murmured. No, the figure said. Why? Because the fire knows. She stared up at the figure. Knows what? That silence is not surrender. It is memory. Selah's throat felt tight. The fire moved again, curling up and around her arms, wrapping like vines. You carry them now, it said. What does that mean? They came as offerings. You came as spark. I don't want to carry anyone, she whispered. I didn't ask for any of this. No, the voice agreed. But fire rarely asks. It only waits. And you lit something. Selah looked down at her hands again. They were glowing brighter now. The fire didn't cling anymore. It danced. Why didn't I burn? She asked. The figure stepped closer. Because you're not meant to end things. You're meant to begin. She looked toward the pit again. The girls still watched. Some of their mouths were moving now, speaking words without sound. She knew she couldn't hear them, not yet, but she would. The time would come. She turned to the figure. What am I supposed to do? Walk. That's it. For now. Selah turned toward the path that curled behind the pit, deeper still. It glowed faintly, not with fire this time, but with something older. Beneath her feet the stone pulsed. She walked forward, the flames parting again, and the walls closed behind her like a cloak of smoke. In the darkness that followed, she didn't feel fear. Only warmth. She didn't look back. Because somewhere far above her, in a village where the ground still cracked and the people still bowed, they thought she was gone. But the fire had not taken her. It had chosen her. She didn't know how long she walked through the glow-lined halls of ember and ash. Time didn't move the same in this place. There was no sky, no day, no sun to rise or fall. Only firelight that pulsed dimmer or brighter depending on her thoughts, and stone that warmed beneath her feet like living skin. Every step felt like it took her deeper, not just into the fire, but into something older, something folded beneath centuries of prayer and smoke and blood. Sometimes the flames whispered. Not words, not yet. Just a kind of humming, like the sound the wind makes when it slips through dry reeds, low and mournful. And every so often she saw flickers in the walls, outlines of hands, shoulders, silhouettes of people who had once walked here but now only moved like memory behind glass. Selah kept going. She passed stone altars draped in long-cooled ash. She passed carvings scorched into the floor, spirals, suns, 100 open eyes staring upward. She passed statues melted down to lumps of glowing orange, their forms barely distinguishable, their eyes always turned inward. At some point the corridor began to widen. The walls lifted like they'd been holding their breath. The floor dipped slightly and ahead, a great red light bloomed, not blinding but immense, pulsing with heat so thick it pressed on her chest. She slowed as the space opened into a wide chamber, its ceiling lost in smoke, its air thick with the scent of old flame and something bitter, like dried herbs turned to charcoal. At the center of the chamber stood the flame. Not fire, not as she knew it. Not a torch or a blaze or a curling stream of smoke. This was a shape. It stood as tall as the temple's tower. Broad as the village square. It had no clear edges, it rippled like it was breathing. Limbs curled and uncurled in slow molten arcs, and at the center of it all was a face, not human, not beast, but something carved of heat and memory. Two eyes opened within the flame. They did not burn. They glowed. Selah stood very still. Then the voice came. Not from the air but from inside her bones, like a drum beat in her ribs. Selah. She shuddered. The fire said her name like it had always known her. Not like the elders who had whispered it into chants. Not like her brother who had shouted it through tears. This was not a calling. This was a remembering. She took a step forward. The ground beneath her feet shimmered. She took another. The heat didn't rise. If anything, it softened, wrapping her in warmth like an old blanket. She stopped a few paces from the center and lifted her chin. Who are you? She asked. The flame shifted. Not like it was breathing, like it was smiling. I am what they feared, and what they worshipped, what they pretended to understand. It leaned forward, not in menace but in presence. I'm not God. I'm not ghost. I am fire. But fire burns, Selah said quietly. And yet here you stand. She hesitated. You didn't burn me? No. Why? The flame moved again, rising, coiling. Because they gave you to me as fuel. But you were never fuel. It lifted one arm. From its glowing fingers, sparks fell like tiny feathers and dissolved before touching the floor. You are flint. The word struck something in her chest. You said that before, she whispered. Why do you keep saying it? Because they tried to break you to feed me. But you are meant to strike, to spark, to light. Selah's hands curled at her sides. The heat inside her, the thing that had been building since she woke in the pyre, trembled. I don't want to be lit, she said. The flame leaned closer. You already are. She looked down at her arms. The glow under her skin had deepened. The spirals on her arms were no longer just painted, they were alive. Thin lines of red-orange light pulsed beneath her skin like veins. Her fingers flickered faintly when she moved them. I didn't ask for this, she said, voice cracking. I didn't want to be chosen. Chosen? The fire rippled with something close to laughter, soft and ancient and sad. Child, they chose you because you were easy to throw away. They thought they were offering me a sacrifice. But sacrifice is not taken. It is given. The chamber pulsed once with that word, given, and the air seemed to shift around her. You didn't want me? She asked, barely audible. I did not want another girl who screamed. I did not want more silence turned to ash. I did not want the hands of cowards feeding me their guilt. The flame lowered. But you did not scream. You walked. You looked into the fire and stayed standing. You did not offer me fear. You offered me a name. Selah's heart thudded. What do you want from me now? To wake. The word didn't make sense. I'm already awake. The flame moved again, this time reaching toward her, not to touch but to show. The air shimmered and rippled, and the smoke above twisted into visions. The village. Her brother. Kneeling beside her empty sleeping mat, sobbing quietly into the cloth she left behind. The priest. Standing before a bowl of oil, his lips moving faster than ever, eyes flicking to the door as if fearing who might walk through it next. The elders. Speaking of the next harvest. Already whispering of another girl. Selah felt her throat tighten. They already forgot me, she said. The fire pulsed. Not all did. But enough. She took a shaky breath. And the girls before me? Did they walk here too? The flame shifted. Smoke curled around them. Figures emerged in it, not solid, not whole, but familiar. The faces she'd seen in the pit. The ones who had come before. Their eyes met hers and her chest ached. Why me? She asked again. The flame did not answer immediately. Instead it pointed to her chest. She looked down. Her heart glowed beneath her skin, not visibly, not like a lantern, but like a pressure. A presence. Something sleeping. Something waiting. Because you can carry them, it finally said. Because you will not burn quietly. You will not turn to smoke and vanish. You will step out. Selah looked up slowly. Out. Back. To the village? To the world. With them inside you. With fire in your eyes. Selah clenched her fists. Then what happens? Then you decide what burns next. The flame began to fade. Not die, shift. Retreat. Return to the chamber's edges. The light dimmed just enough to reveal the floor beneath her feet. It had become a spiral, glowing faintly with the same light now moving through her veins. The voice echoed one last time. Wake, Selah. And in that moment she felt it. Not fear. Not anger. Not sorrow. Power. The flames inside her were no longer gentle. They were ready. She turned to the spiral path and walked into the dark. Asked ChatGPT. The air shifted. It wasn't hotter. It was heavier. Like something unseen had entered the space and was now sitting across her shoulders, sliding down her spine, coiling into her ribs like smoke that didn't want to leave. Selah had left the flame behind, but the fire had not left her. It hummed beneath her skin, like a second heartbeat, like a song she hadn't learned yet but already knew the rhythm of. The corridor narrowed. Its glowing floor curved again, spiraling like the marks inked on her arms. The walls darkened not from flame but from soot, thick, black, and clinging. Every so often the soot stirred without wind. It shifted along the walls like breath. Like something watching. She walked. And with each step she began to see them. Not clearly at first, more like shadows in the smoke. A girl knelt in a white robe, hands tied, lips murmuring something. A boy no older than 10, his head bowed, feet bare on the edge of a pyre. Another girl, silent, face blank as the torch approached. Flickers of moments, all fading before they finished, as though memory itself couldn't bear to hold them long. But Selah held them. She couldn't stop looking. Couldn't stop watching. And then she started to hear. Not screaming. Not weeping. Names. Whispered. One. Then another. Then dozens. Then hundreds. They filled the corridor like wind. They danced through the soot like music made from breath. The voices were soft, never shouting, but insistent, like a stream pushing past stone. Names spoken like promises. Like pleas. Like they had waited for someone to remember. She whispered one back. Leone. The smoke pulsed. Kara. The walls shimmered. Tovo. Mima. Alessa. Every name she said stirred the soot. Some of it drifted down, twining around her arms, curling against her neck, pressing into her skin not to harm her, but to enter her. The names didn't just want breath. They wanted body. They wanted blood to carry them again. She tried to stop. Tried to back away. But her legs wouldn't listen. They moved forward, step by step, slower now, her breath catching in her chest as the corridor widened once more, and opened into a room she hadn't seen before. It wasn't made of stone or flame or ember. It was ash. A great bowl-shaped chamber, carved into the heart of the hollow ember, with walls that shifted with the weight of centuries. Ash rose in dunes and waves, some high as her waist, others smooth like snow. Every movement she made sent tiny clouds of dust into the air, and with them more names. Loma. Velen. Ora. The names did not come from her now. They came from the ash. From the earth itself. She dropped to her knees. Not because she was told to. Not because she was weak. But because her body understood something her mind didn't yet, that this place was not just memory. It was mourning. And mourning demanded reverence. As she knelt, the ash beneath her shifted. Not in one place, in many. All around the chamber, small mounds trembled. Fingers rose. Ash clung to them like sleeves. Then arms. Then shoulders. Then heads. Figures. Not whole, not living, but real. They rose from the ground in silence. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. All draped in ash. All staring at her, not with eyes of flame or judgment, but of waiting. Some were girls no older than Selah. Some were mothers. Some were children so small they barely reached her hip. All sacrificed. All silenced. But here, in this place, they remembered. The tallest one stepped forward. Her robe was woven from ash and threads of smoke. Her hands were black with soot, but her eyes were clear, not burning but steady. You walk in fire, the woman said. Her voice cracked with age and depth. Do you know what that means? Selah shook her head slowly. It means you carry, the woman said. It means we no longer vanish when the wind comes. Another figure stepped forward, a young girl with 2 braids. It means we are not smoke anymore. A boy, we are bones. Another voice from behind her, we are names. Selah felt her throat burn. I didn't choose this. No, the woman said. But we did. They all stepped closer. You are the one who woke in the fire. The one who did not turn to cinder. You are the space we needed. Selah looked down at her arms again. The spirals glowed, not just red now but gold. Something shimmered beneath her skin, like thousands of tiny lights moving through her blood. The air thickened. Then the ash moved again. But not like before. It rose. Spinning into the air like a storm. A spiral of dust and memory and breathless names. The chamber darkened as the ash gathered above her, and then all at once, it fell. Onto her. Into her. Not pain. Not weight. Memory. She gasped and her mouth filled with wind, not air but voices rushing in, speaking all at once. Visions split through her mind. A mother weeping as her daughter is led away. A boy pushed into fire, his father watching from the edge with hollow eyes. A girl begging the flame for forgiveness when she'd done nothing wrong. They flooded her. Each life. Each moment. Each scream that never got to echo. She saw them all. And then she saw herself, not as she was but as they saw her. Standing tall in a chamber of ash, her skin glowing with lines of molten gold, her eyes twin coals, her hair alight with flickers of flame that didn't burn. You are our vessel now, they said in one voice. You are how we remember. Selah opened her eyes. The chamber was still. The figures had returned to ash. But she was not alone. She could feel them in her bones, woven into her spine, her heart, her breath. Not ghosts. Not burdens. Not chains. Voices. Strength. Memory. Rage. She stood. Her feet did not sink into the ash. It held her now, lifted her. She walked through it, and with every step, fire bloomed beneath her soles. Not wide, not wild, but sure. A steady flame that whispered, "We are here, we are here, we are here." She reached the spiral corridor again and paused. She turned her head. The chamber behind her shimmered once, and then fell quiet. She bowed. Not as a girl, but as the keeper. And the ash stirred like wind had kissed it back to life. Then she walked on. There was no door to leave through. No staircase carved in stone. No torch to guide her way. Just the path she had come down, now barely visible, covered in the same ash that had cradled the names of the forgotten. Selah stood at the edge of that memory chamber, the last whispers of the ashes still humming inside her bones. She inhaled, and it tasted like smoke. But not the choking kind. Not the kind that blinds and steals breath. This smoke was steady, clear, and slow. It moved through her like a second breath, a second self. The moment her foot touched the spiral again, the flame stirred. It did not rise around her this time. It gathered, as though drawn. Not like fire chasing dry grass, more like water drawn to roots. Selah's body, once raw with fear, now held something deep and unflinching. She was not lighter than before. If anything, she felt heavier, but the weight was not burden. It was belonging. One step, then another. Each footfall struck the floor and left behind a small glow, gold and red and pulsing faintly, like embers left behind after a fire walks through. The spiral wound upward, and though the path was long, her body did not tire. The ashes still wrapped around her arms like gloves, clinging to her fingers, brushing her collarbone like fine silk. Above her, the stone began to change. The walls had once been soot-black and pulsing with a low rhythmic glow. Now they shimmered faintly, catching her light and throwing it back in soft reflections. She saw herself sometimes, flickering in corners, in bends, in the gentle turns of the path. And each time her reflection looked more like something new. Not a girl. Not a sacrifice. But something born. With each turn, with each step upward, the fire responded. Not in words, not anymore. It had said all it needed to say. Now it moved with her. Coiled around her ribs. Filled the hollows between the names buried in her chest. She was not a carrier of flames. She was the place they returned to. She passed the place where she'd first seen the flame, where its face had looked into her and named her Flint. But now that chamber was quiet. The great figure had vanished, melted into smoke or memory or both. In its place, a single coal sat in a bowl of black stone. It pulsed once as she passed, like a heart that still remembered her. And then she climbed. Longer than she remembered. The way down had felt short, because fear made time sprint. But now time moved in reverence. The air changed subtly. Cooler, yes, but not cold. The smoke thinned. The stone lightened. She knew, without seeing the sky, that dawn was near. Halfway up she paused. She did not know why, only that her legs stopped and her hands reached out to touch the wall. It shimmered beneath her palm. Heat moved beneath the stone like something sleeping just below the surface. And when she pressed harder, she saw it. A flash. A face. Not hers. One of the girls. One of the names she had spoken. Luma, perhaps. Or Alessa. The image blinked, once, and was gone. But the wall stayed warm. And Selah knew, the ashes had not scattered. They had moved. With her. She continued. The higher she rose, the more the fire curled inward. It no longer trailed behind her in long flares or bright embers. It folded, tucked itself neatly into her spine, her fingertips, her throat. Her skin pulsed with it, not like open flame but like light seen through closed eyelids. A kind of glow that felt alive. The ashes had left their mark. So had the voices. So had the silence. She was no longer only Selah. She was the name she carried, the screams that had no place, the breaths that were stolen before their time. But she was also her own, the girl who had been pushed into fire and had not burned. She reached the final turn of the spiral. Ahead, she saw the faint edge of the pyre's mouth. The place where fire had once towered, where her body had been offered, where she had fallen, not into death but into the memory of those who had. The floor here was blackened wood, crisped and cracking. No one stood at the top. No priest. No crowd. The dawn had not yet come. She stepped up into the ash circle and for a moment stood very still. The night was cold. The wind gentle. But around her, the earth shimmered faintly. The pyre had burned down, leaving behind a ring of embers still warm from the ritual. No one had dared approach since her body had vanished. No footprints marred the black dust. And now she stood in the center. Alone. Oh, change. She looked down at her hands. The gold in her veins had faded, not vanished but gone quiet. Her palms were streaked with soot. Her wrists were wrapped in fire-touched cloth, half burned, half transformed. Her hair lifted slightly in the wind, glowing faintly at the ends, like the fire had kissed every strand and refused to let go. She inhaled, and the air came willingly. The stars above her shimmered once and then began to fade. The sky lightened in the east. The faint gray of pre-dawn stretched across the edge of the world. She stepped forward. She walked out of the pyre. The earth didn't smoke. The sky didn't crack. But the world knew. The wind paused. The embers stirred in a circle behind her. And in the still silence of that last night moment, something ancient breathed out. Selah. She was not flame. She was not ash. She was not the screaming girl who had begged to live. She was what fire made when it remembered who had been fed to it. And now, with her steps falling steady into the cold dust of the waking world, she was walking back. Not to thank anyone. Not to kneel. But to be seen. To be reckoned with. To stand where the priests had stood and see if they dared look at her now. The surface waited. The village waited. And somewhere rain gathered. She would walk into it. But not yet. First, she walked out of the fire, and brought the names with her. Ask ChatGPT. The sky cracked open just as her foot touched the ash-ringed grass. It was not thunder that followed, but a low groan from the clouds, as though the heavens themselves had watched her climb and could no longer hold their breath. The first drop of rain fell. It touched her shoulder and hissed. Steam curled upward from where it landed, rising like a thread of white smoke against the cool gray air. Another drop came, striking her hair. Another, her cheek. Each one met her body with that same strange resistance, as if even water now had to ask permission to touch her. And then the village saw her. Gasps traveled faster than wind. They had gathered early, thinking only to see the last embers die, the final ashes of the girl they had given to fire. Perhaps a priest would collect the remains. Perhaps the elders would chant and thank the gods. Perhaps someone would cry. But no one had expected her to walk out. Alive. Walking. Glowing. Their eyes widened. Their hands stilled. The children who had been brought to learn reverence, clutched their mother's robes in silence. The men at the front, hunters, blacksmiths, the ones who'd helped bind her wrists, slowly stepped backward as if they feared the earth might remember their footprints. No one spoke. Not one word. It was as though all the language in the village had been ripped away, stolen by the fire and given only to her. Selah stood tall, eyes forward, her gaze cutting through smoke and fog in recognition. She looked at them, not with accusation, not with sorrow, but with something deeper. She knew. She saw. And that was worse than any curse. The rain came harder now, drumming the roofs, pelting the leaves, soaking through the elders' ceremonial robes. But not her. Around her, steam rose like breath from a god's mouth. Her skin still shimmered faintly, veins threaded with molten light that pulsed now and then like a heartbeat carved from coal. She took another step. The crowd parted without a word. They did not dare meet her gaze. Mothers held their children close. Fathers bowed their heads. The priest, the same one who had led the chants and smeared her forehead with oil before casting her into the flame, dropped his prayer beads. They snapped against the stone and scattered like seeds too afraid to grow. She kept walking. Toward the platform where the elders sat beneath the carved totems of the fire god. They had taken the highest place in the village for themselves, built on the backs of tradition and silence and fear. Each of them had voted. Each of them had looked her in the eyes and said it was an honor, that the gods required her life, that she would save them. Now they saw what they had made. The first to fall was Elder Cume. He had been the loudest voice, the one who'd said, "The fire must eat the young. It always has. That is balance." His lips trembled now. His knees buckled. He fell, not in reverence, not in humility, but in something primal, fear that had remembered its name. The others followed. One by one they dropped. Not because she asked. Not because she demanded. Because they had no words left. Because she had taken them. Not through curse but through return. Through the memory of every girl who had screamed and found no echo. Every boy who had been promised glory and found only ash. Every parent who had been told to watch, to obey, to hush. Their voices had been given to the fire long ago. And now the fire had come back, with eyes. Still she said nothing. She stood before them, the elders kneeling in their fine robes, their beaded necklaces soaking with rain, their scrolls and chants and symbols suddenly nothing more than paper, ink and trembling breath. The silence spread. The wind did not blow. The trees did not creak. Even the rain seemed to hesitate, confused by the soundless space it tried to fill. She lifted her hand. Not high. Just enough to show the palm. The spiral was still there, not tattooed, not burned, but glowing faintly beneath the skin. Ash and ember and memory alive. It pulsed once. Twice. The elder closest to her sobbed aloud. She stepped forward. And as she did, steam followed, rising in swirls, curling around her ankles, weaving between the stones. The earth hissed with each footfall, like it could not decide if it should welcome her or flee. She walked to the pyre again, not to climb it, not to burn, but to look. It was nothing now. Charred wood. Collapsed beams. A circle of heat and regret. But in the center where she had lain, one coal still glowed. Not much, just a single ember flickering in the wind. She knelt beside it. Not for them. For the girls before. She touched the coal. It did not burn. It brightened. All across the ash ring more coals stirred. One by one, small red lights emerged from the black, faint at first, then stronger. 100 tiny stars in a circle, each one pulsing like a breath remembered. Like a name whispered. The crowd watched. She stood again and turned to face them. Her voice came not loud but clear, as though the fire had carried it upward and scattered it like seed. You will not take another. No one moved. You will not call it honor. No breath stirred. You will say their names. Still silence until, from the back, a whisper. Alessa. Another. Tovo. More. Nima. Leone. Kara. Velen. The names poured from the lips of those who had tried to forget. Those who had closed their eyes, convinced themselves it was tradition. Now they wept. Not just because of her, but because the fire had not burned her memory away. It had given it back. Selah stepped down from the pyre. The crowd did not touch her. Did not follow. But they parted again. She walked through the village with smoke curling behind her, steam hissing at her heels, coals still glowing in the center of their sacred fire. And behind her, one by one, the people began to kneel. Not to pray. To remember. To mourn. To speak the names they were told to forget. The rain did not stop. But it no longer hissed when it touched her. It fell around her gently, steaming in soft breaths as if it too had seen the fire's memory and bowed. The village no longer felt like a place made of mud and timber and thatch. It had become something else. Something warmer. Something stranger. Selah walked through its winding paths not like a ghost returning home, nor like a queen reclaiming a crown. She did not walk as a girl who had been sacrificed. She walked as one who had been chosen, but not by them. By the fire itself. It followed her now, though not in the way the villagers first imagined. There were no flames trailing in her footsteps. No burning footprints. But something happened wherever she passed. Hearths, cold since the drought, flickered to life. Flames that had died long ago sputtered back into being. Oil lamps that had not been touched in weeks glowed as she neared, their wicks untouched. People noticed. They didn't say it aloud. Not yet. Words were still brittle things trembling in their throats. But the children saw first, as they always do. One little girl clutched her mother's hand and whispered, "Why does the fire follow her?" Another boy said he had seen a spark dance behind Selah's shadow, bright and quick like a bird made of ember. And though no adult confirmed it, none denied it either. Because they too felt the warmth that came with her. Not the warmth of comfort. No. This warmth was ancient. Sacred. Watchful. At first they only stared. She passed the butcher's stall, and his roasting pit blazed to life. He had not lit it. He dropped the knife in his hand, backing away, mumbling a prayer to the fire god. But his words felt thin like ash on the tongue. Then she passed the well. The old woman drawing water screamed. The ropes of the pulley, soaked from rain, burst into brief flame and yet did not burn. They glowed gold and red, the fire licking upward like curious hands before retreating. The bucket was lowered. The water came up warm, not boiling but pulsing with heat like it had remembered the sun's touch after years of forgetting. Word spread. They began to avoid her, not with cruelty, but with reverence twisted by fear. Mothers turned their children's faces away. Men lowered their eyes. Even the younger priests who once watched the pyre with pride now lit their incense from a distance and refused to look toward the old temple. But she didn't need them to look. She needed them to feel. Because the fire did not want silence anymore. It wanted attention. And it had her. Every evening, the torches around the village square leaned toward her when she passed. Not from wind. Not from accident. They bowed, like stalks of flame following the sun. The people noticed. The old widows whispered of omens. The children called her the Ember Girl. Even the wind seemed to curl around her like a second skin. Then came the priest. He had not spoken since her return, had not left the temple, had not prayed aloud. It was said he had locked himself in for 3 days, fasting, waiting for the gods to make sense of what had happened. On the 4th day he emerged. He stood at the edge of the temple courtyard, where the stone path led toward the sacred hearth, the one Selah had swept as a child, the one where the sacrifices were prepared. His robes were soaked from the morning's rain, his beard untrimmed, eyes rimmed red. And there she stood in the center of the square, barefoot on the wet stone, steam still rising from her skin like she carried the pyre in her breath. "You are not what you seem," he said. His voice cracked like old wood. Selah said nothing. He raised his hands. "You mock the rites. You defile the will of the gods. You bring fire where it was not called." Still she didn't speak. The people gathered, hesitant, circling the square like moths drawn by a light they could neither resist nor trust. No one moved closer than the first ring of stones. They stood in rain that now fell with a kind of caution, threading between breaths. The priest took a step forward. "I anointed your forehead," he said as if that gave him power. "I fed your name to the flame." Selah raised her eyes. They glowed faintly, not from anger but from depth. Her voice when it came was not loud. "You fed it," she said, "but it did not eat." Something moved then, not wind, not fire. But the flame noticed. The torches flared. The hearths in nearby homes roared. And then the priest gasped. A glow burst from the center of his chest, small then wide. His robes ignited. The fire caught so fast, so suddenly, that his scream came only after the flames had curled around his arms, his beard, his face. People rushed forward, but Selah lifted a single hand. They stopped. The priest fell to his knees, hands lifted in horror. His voice cracked with pain. "No, no, no." He burst like dry tinder. The flames consumed him in seconds, burning clean, too clean. When it was done, only a pile of ash remained, a neat circle of gray at the center of the sacred path. The fire had judged. And it had found him wanting. No one moved. No one dared. Selah stepped forward, past the ash, her feet not leaving a trace. She turned to the people. "You built your rituals on silence," she said. "You called it order. You called it sacred. You gave the fire names and told it what to burn." Her voice was stronger now, steadier, like a bell that had been struck and would not stop ringing. "You forgot that fire listens too. That it remembers." The villagers wept without sound. A child sobbed once and her mother knelt beside her, pressing her face into the mud. Selah looked up. The temple still stood. The banner still flapped. The stone hearth waited. She walked toward it. With each step, torches along the courtyard blazed to life. A path of light unfurled behind her. The rain did not reach her now. It curved around her form like a dome, evaporating before it could touch her skin. Steam rolled in soft waves. She reached the temple gate. Inside, the flames of the sacred hearth rose without touch, alive and dancing. The old scrolls lining the walls caught and curled, flaring into dust. Statues of the fire god cracked at their bases, their stone eyes blackening. The chamber grew red. And then quiet. Selah stood in the center. She knelt once, only once, to press her hand to the hearthstone. The spiral in her palm glowed. It lit the stone. It lit the walls. And then she whispered, "No more." Outside the flames died. Not from wind. Not from water. But from will. The fire did not leave the village. It had simply decided who it belonged to now. And it belonged to her. Ask ChatGPT. The path to the altar was overgrown, as if even the earth had tried to forget what had been done there. Selah walked it barefoot, each step pressing into the damp soil, the steam rising around her legs like the ghosts of prayers that had never been answered. The villagers followed from a distance. They didn't dare get too close, but they couldn't look away. Something in their bones, older than memory, deeper than guilt, told them this moment mattered. That something was about to end. Or begin. The altar stood ahead, untouched since her burning. It was a wide slab of stone, carved generations ago with sacred marks, now faded from years of ash and blood. Vines had begun to creep across its base. Cracks lined the surface like veins, though none had broken through. Until now. Selah stopped in front of it. Her eyes did not blink. She reached out and laid both palms against the stone, one glowing faintly with the spiral of fire, the other steady, cold. She took a breath. Not deep. Not labored. just enough to fill the hollow space where a girl might once have trembled. And she spoke. Alessa. A crack split across the altar, sharp and sudden. A bolt of lightning flashed above, white and jagged across the gray sky. She did not flinch. Tommy. The stone groaned. Another line raced down its side. The villagers gasped. Thunder rolled behind the mountains, slow and shaking, like something enormous had stirred in its sleep. Lima. A third break, deeper this time, splitting the edge clean in two. Smoke began to curl from the statues around the altar, the ones carved in the shape of the old gods, the fire spirits, the ones who had demanded girls like her. Their eyes wept gray. Selah stepped forward. Her voice did not shake. Rang. Yara. Thunder answered again, but closer now, the kind that shakes ribs and hearts alike. The trees bent slightly toward her, leaves rustling like a crowd holding their breath. She placed her hands back on the stone. Namari. Aki. Velo. Dar. Sena. The altar screamed, not in words, but in a deep, crumbling wail as its center split completely down the middle. The halves shuddered apart, collapsing to either side. The vines withered. The symbols burned red, then blackened to dust. The statues fell with it. One by one they tipped and cracked, their carved hands breaking, their faces chipping away. Smoke poured from their hollow eyes, trailing upward into the clouds. The rain, which had slowed, began again, but this time in rhythm like a drumbeat in the sky. Selah turned to the villagers. The gods you fed were never gods, she said. They were cages. No one responded. Some wept openly. Some fell to their knees, but not to pray, to cover their faces, to shield themselves from the weight of what they had seen. A few ran, but not far. The sound followed them. The memory would too. She turned back to the altar, now rubble. The girl's name still echoed in the air. They would not be forgotten now. Not buried beneath chance. Not erased with rituals. She had cracked open the stone. And the sky had listened. The fire within her did not sleep. It did not flicker or fade with distance. It had no hunger for wood, no need for kindling. It was not the kind of flame anyone had ever seen in a hearth or a torch. It pulsed beneath her skin like blood, curled in her breath like smoke, hummed in her bones like a name remembered too long. Selah did not speak of it. She did not need to. The people saw. They saw it in her stillness, how she no longer flinched when thunder cracked or when elders barked orders in passing. They saw it in her eyes, the way they glowed faintly even after sunset, like coals under a blanket of ash, steady and waiting. Not threatening. Not begging. Just present. Constant. She walked through the village as the days passed, silent as a flickering flame. No one stopped her. No one dared. The same elders who once chose her as a sacrifice now bowed their heads as she passed, unsure if they were showing respect or fear or both. She no longer lit lanterns at night. She didn't need to. When she walked, the shadows pulled back and light seemed to follow, not harsh, not blinding, but soft and deep like the glow of firelight on old stone. It moved with her. It lived in her. Children crept to their doorways to see her pass. Some called her Lady Flame. Others whispered stories about her voice, saying it could burn lies clean from a man's throat. A girl once dared to approach her with a stolen bracelet hidden in her hand. Selah only looked at her, and the child burst into tears, dropping the bracelet at her feet without a word. She picked it up, returned it to the girl, said nothing. The fire knew, and it forgave when it could, but not always. One morning, a man who had once been a village scribe, one who had helped write the names of girls into the sacrifice ledger, came forward pleading repentance. He claimed he had been young, that he hadn't known, that he was only following orders. Selah looked at him, her eyes calm, and the parchment he carried burst into flames. He dropped it, screaming, and backed away. His skin was unburned. His pride was not. The fire had spoken. She was no god. Not in the old sense. Not in the way the temple had defined. She had no altar. She gave no sermons. But still they came to her. The people. The broken. The guilty. The curious. And Selah listened. She sat in the ruins of the old temple where the altar had split and the statues had cracked. Vines were growing there now. Flowers too. The air no longer smelled of burnt incense but of rain and sap and warmth. They came in silence. Sat at her feet. Spoke their truths. The fire fed on truth. But it fed more hungrily on lies. It flared when someone bent their story, when they softened cruelty to make themselves look kinder. It pulsed in her chest, in her fingertips. Once she reached out to someone and their sleeves smoked before their voice did. After that, the village learned. It was better to speak plainly. Selah never punished. She didn't have to. The fire inside her judged in its own way, not always with flame but with memory, with reflection, with discomfort, with a heat that sat in the marrow until it moved something loose. And always she walked at night. No one followed. They would wake and see the soft glow moving past their homes, flickering on their walls, casting long shadows. No footsteps. No words. Only the fire's shape, constant and careful. It lit the places that had gone dark. The alley behind the bakery where a girl once cried after being shamed. The well where a boy had been struck for asking why. The back room of the priest's quarters, now abandoned, where vows were once broken in secret. She walked. The fire moved with her. And the village changed. Slowly. Silently. Because the fire inside her did not only burn. Remembered? Ask ChatGPT. The fire pit was left to grow cold. No wood had touched it in seasons. No incense. No prayers. No girls. It stood in the center of the village, a blackened wound in the earth, not forgotten but watched. Children dared each other to step near its edge, though none lingered. Elders passed it with quiet glances. It had once devoured the innocent. Now it devoured only silence. No one spoke of offerings anymore. Not aloud. Selah's name was not etched into stone, nor painted onto temple walls. But it did not need to be. It lived in the way people looked at fire now, not as salvation but as something wild and aware. They spoke of her in hushed stories, stories that changed with each telling. In one she became a winged ember, glowing red and gold, circling above villages like a storm. In another she lived deep in the ash caves at the edge of the world, her eyes like coal and her breath like smoke. But always the stories ended the same. No more girls were taken. The fire had a new memory now. And it remembered her. She had not been the first girl thrown into the flame. But she had been the last. Some claimed they had seen her after. That she walked the forests at dusk, barefoot, leaving trails of steam where the dew touched her. That her hands still glowed if someone told a lie near her. That her laughter could crack stone. That her silence could make a liar choke on their tongue. And then there were the warnings. They were not written down but passed ear to ear, generation to generation. If you ever try to offer another girl to the flame, the fire will not stay silent. It will not take the girl. It will come for you. They say you'll hear footsteps on scorched earth. That the air will shift. That your hearth will go dark, and when the fire returns, it will not be yours. And she will be standing there. Not as a god. Not as a ghost. But as justice. The temple had crumbled long ago. No one rebuilt it. Where the altar once stood, a tree had grown, tall ash-colored bark, its leaves the deep red of embers before they die. Birds did not nest in it. Nothing climbed it. But the villagers placed offerings of a different kind beneath it now. Truth, confessions, names. Not of girls to give, but of wounds to be healed. Because it was understood now, not every flame wanted to burn. Some wanted to be heard. There were new songs too. Not the chants of sacrifice but lullabies, quiet ones. Mothers hummed them to daughters at night, brushing their hair, promising the fire would never touch them. Fathers built hearts with care, teaching their sons how to tend flame without fear. And no child was taught that pain must come before peace. They had learned. Because one girl had made them. She had stepped into the fire and walked out bearing all those who had not. She had become more than flame. More than fury. She had become a promise. And in that promise the world changed. They called her many names now, Emberborn, Flamewalker, the Last Offering. But most just called her the girl who ended the fire's hunger. And when lightning struck far-off hills, or when a fire flickered too brightly in the corner of an eye, some swore they saw her watching. Not to punish. Not to haunt. But to remind. And that was enough.